for this briefing. On the panel, we have the of NERSA, Mr. Tembani Bukula. Mr. Bukula, I would appreciate if you can just switch on your camera to show your face, if possible. Show his face later. And we also have the Chief Executive Officer of NERSA, Advocate Nomalanga Sithole. CEO, if you are able to show your face, you can switch on your camera. If not, there you are. Thanks, CEO. Thanks a lot. I know you had some network challenges. And lastly, we have the full-time regulator member, Prime. Thank you. Take us through the NERSA mandate with new applications. Over to you, CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Hlebela. I'll try and use my camera. If I have challenges, I will switch it off. Good afternoon, members of the NERSA, representatives of different media houses, and all those that have joined us remotely. Ladies and gentlemen, it is important with the primary role to carry out regulatory functions contained in the Act of 2006, the Petroleum Pipe, to applications made in line with the provisions of its governing legislation. With regard to the Eskom's revenue application, Eskom submitted its fifth multi-year price determination, which was based for a period of 3 years. There were various court processes which were instituted Eskom's revenue application to ensure that its exercise of power. Therefore, the decision taken by the energy regulator today has been checked against the rationality and legality principles and any other applicable tool that has been approved by the regulator. Both job losses, load shedding, and the Regulation Act. Lastly, it should be noted the quality of. You may proceed. Thanks.
Thanks, CEO, for sharing Eskom's revenue application.
Members of NERSA staff, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. All to this media briefing to announce the energy regulator's decision on Eskom's. Ladies and gentlemen, may I just take you through a brief background on the application. As the CEO has already mentioned, the application was submitted on the 22nd of application. First one being your regulated asset base, primary energy, operating usage, after considering due processes, which included publishing the Eskom application under the comments. And the energy regulator conducted public hearings to solicit comments from interested and affected. This application was published on the 29th of July, September 2022, and we received more than 2,000 written applications. Various environmental organizations, most of the municipalities, including SALGA, the organization of undoing tax abuse, and the South, many others. And I do want to thank and acknowledge that we received those comments and we have considered them in making this decision. It is therefore important to indicate that Eskom's revenue application 2024 and 2024-2025 were being considered under weak economic growth, a fiscal deficit, rising government debt, declining household income and wealth, declining private and public sector investments, high levels of unemployment, COVID-19, low industrial production, and the recent implementation of load shedding. These to affect the South African economy, correct these imbalances. All of these challenges mentioned above have been taken into consideration by the energy regulator when we were making the decision. So, ladies and gentlemen, based on the information, we made the following decisions. National customers, and this will be based on the previously approved tariff principles as detailed in the Eskom tariff retail tariff structural adjustments methodology, which has been approved by NERSA. 1 billion rand, which includes the regulatory clearing account balances and the implementation of the court approved the allowable revenue of 318 billion rand after making various adjustments, after extracting efficiencies and adjusting where required. Therefore, NERSA has approved of 300 billion rand for the year 2023-2024 financial year, and this translates to 180 cents per kilowatt hour, 8 cents per kilowatt hour for the year 22. The revenue of 334 billion rand, which translates to 195.95 cents per kilowatt hour, resulting in a 12.74% increase based on the year of the tariff that was approved previously. The energy regulator will consider the Eskom retail tariff structural amendments or adjustments for the year 2023-2024 that will be submitted by Eskom after this approval. The regulator will subject all of the approved costs to further extensive prudency reviews and efficiency tests, and look at whatever other performance thresholds that can be imposed. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to indicate that the energy regulator has attempted to strike a balance amongst Eskom's financial sustainability and affordability of electricity services to customers. May I, at this point, hand over to Mr. Gumede, who will take us through the details of the discussion and of all of the questions that may arise after this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson. And thank you, CEO. Thank you, Tabela. To facilitate the discussion, taking, I think this is presentation. Assuming that it is members of the media, I would like to then give you the details. So I'm putting the long term. Let's start by recapping on what the methodology, which is known as MYPD5 methodology. So this was the application. It has got a number of areas. The key areas, I think the key drivers that I would just like to indicate here are that, as you can see, the biggest driver here is primary energy, followed by IPPs, and also for this application. And of course, it's linked to that would be during the application. NERSA made a number of energy, and is related to coal, related to the amount of diesel that was applied for. Of course, by making those adjustments, one of the drivers why those 10 billion rands in terms of the PPAs that are not going to be realized in the project. But there have also been some adjustments up on that based on the expected short-term power purchase agreements that may be entered into both in both years. So those have been included. The amounts have been adjusted upwards to accommodate for those that may be included. So a number of the IPP projects that are not have been moved main drivers for this change. So as indicated by the chairperson, is that the original application for Eskom for FY 23-24 was 334 billion, and that was adjusted down by 33 billion, and adjusted down to 303 billion. And for the financial year 24-25, it was the RCAs was 365,195 million, and that has been adjusted down to 336,054 million in terms of the decision that was made by NERSA. Now, adding the 15 billion rands in terms of the government injection coming out of the court order of that settlement for the outstanding 59 billion, of which the agreement is that we'll be recovering 15 billion rands for the first 4 years and the the final year. It comes out. Methodology 2016 methodology was indicated in the first year. So that was the headline. The numbers at the top there are different. but the actual for the percentage increase is 18.65% for FY 23-24 and 12.74% for the following financial year. Apologies for the graph at the top. Dealing with numbers, I think these things do creep in. Apologies for that. From the original application to the revised application that was submitted in September last year by Eskom, which had to take into account any of the prevailing of the changes that may have occurred between the time that we submitted the application originally to the time when this application was being considered. And the biggest change, really, which was the biggest driver, if you look, is actually it emanates from purchases from IPPs. Is that in the original applications, but that was reduced down to 31,000 to when that was then effected, it then forced Eskom to then say it needs to actually work its coal plants a little bit harder. So then we can see the upward adjustment on the coal-fired power stations. Although, as members of the regulator, we felt that it was definitely far less than what it should be. But the biggest change really related to the change in the billion to 2.5 billion rands in FY24 and 2532 to 2.5 billion rands in 2025. So in fact, when Eskom revised, this was a serious concern for members. What was clear in terms of the analysis was that even at 12% open cycle gas turbine load factor, there was still a significant energy shortfall. In fact, if you look at the numbers at the fall, to the extent of 25 terawatt hours and 19, in essence, what we are saying, although what was being applied for was the target of 6% load factor to 12%, but that was not dealing with load shedding. So, in evaluating the request for this amount of to be budgeting for information that we don't have, which perhaps Eskom that the past, this is information is drawn from the Eskom website, is that as you can see in the past year, for sometimes Eskom was actually using OCGTs at load factors higher than 40%. But on average, exhausted the budget, its own budget on in terms of the project, is that it has on average, Eskom was sitting at a close to 16.9% on average, the running average load factor for OCGT last year. So this kind of raised the question whether this excess use of OCGT would not result in any of these emergency plans lines to be used in case of emergencies for Black Start and all other provision of other ancillary services like voter control and things like that. When they are required, is that when they are used this excessively, will this not lead to these plants not being available when they are needed the most for the purposes for which they were installed? It was quite clear that the problem is somewhere at Eskom. As you can see, if you look at the increase in the loss factor as well, basically in both in this graph shows both the unplanned and the other capacity load factors that have increased dramatically in the past year. At any one point in time, with the correct problem. Are we incentivizing, could we be seen to be incentivizing inefficiencies within allowing even the 12% that was applied for? Because it is quite clear that in these capacity loss factors, the question is, are these not within Eskom's management to control? That in fact it raised another question that says, is Eskom, because it became clear, and this is just data coming from the 10th, Tuesday, the 10th, red line at the red bar here, it's quite clear that these OCGTs are now deployed virtually in every hour of the day. And it is also quite clear the installed coal capacity at Eskom is to the tune of 39,000 megawatts. That, sometimes the coal that is used is less than 39,000. And at best is just above 18,000. Now, is this not where the forecast should be? So I will stop here because this is the decision I did in respect of the OCGTs instead of using the plan for what they were designed to be used for. I thank you. Over to you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gumede. May I then hand over back to you, Director? Thank you.
Thank you for announcing the decision, and thanks, Mr. Gumede, for the detailed presentation on the decision. Colleagues from the media, I would request that you introduce yourself before asking the question, and the media house you are representing. I will, if possible, you can switch on your camera so that we can see your face, and switch it off for the sake of the bandwidth, and then ask your question. I'll take the first 5 hands in the first round, and then we'll come again, for the second round, and taking 5 hands again. I see Antoinette, I see Terence, hands that I'm seeing now. You can go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. Antoinette Slabbert from Rapport newspaper. I would just like a load factor for each year for the OCGTs that NISA has allowed. And what does the corresponding EAF then need to be? And do you think, what if Eskom doesn't achieve? It's just a catch-22, it seems. Thank you.
There was a slide that I missed from Mr. Gumede, and it seemed to imply CA are taken into account. That rises to 32% for this function for diesel costs for the year. So I think the Eskom application was for nearly 17 billion. I think it was 16.9 billion. And I just saw figures of 2.5 billion. Well, I couldn't quite work them out from the slide. So could you explain exactly what you've decided in terms of sanctioning for diesel for the OCGTs for 2023, 24 and 24, 25? Thank you.
Thanks, and Terence. I think the panel can respond. Mr. Gumede.
Thank you, Mr. Tabela. Maybe responding to the first questions, and I guess the 2 questions are, and for some reason I've actually, it's one of those, because the change from the actual number from 12% that was applied for to the number that we approved, because we approved the number based on 6%, so 12% load factor. The load factor that we have approved is, all we are then simply saying is that associated with this load factor for OCGT, and actually bring the EAF back to, at least this is in Eskom's hands. I think it's unfair to expect, and this is unfortunately that is called for by both the Electricity Regulation Act as well as the methodology itself, that we need to do and balance the interests both the consumers and that of not operating or not operate, because we do believe that it's Eskom's, it's not Eskom is not being efficient in this process. That then the consumers pay for for those plants as well as pay for diesel. Right? But it's another to then over and above that to then allow an additional amount. So that is in essence where we're coming from. But what if that Eskom cannot achieve that? Well, it's well within its hand. It's well within its control. Those plants are well within their control. And for an efficient licensee, they should know how to fix the problems. Whether it's the problems is of quality of coal that's coming through, or any other problem that they need to deal with. They are the ones that are the custodians of that asset. So that is the first. It's the answer to you, Anthony. Terence, in terms of your question, I'm actually trying to figure out. I'm hoping that my colleagues can give me the exact number, but the exact number in terms of the diesel that we are allowing. But the percentage effective increase is 18.65 for FY 23-24, and then 12.74 for FY 24-25. But I'm going to ask my colleagues to supply me with the other number for the 6%. What the actual number is with the briefing. Thanks.
Thanks, Winston.
Mr. Shabela, are you waiting for me?
There are hands that are up. Yes, you are now. Yes, we can hear you.
Apologies, it's just a technical glitch, with my laptop here. Thanks, Mr. Kumede, for the responses. I see there are follow-ups again from Antoinette and Terence. I just want to check, from the other colleagues, if ever is there no one who would like to pose a question or just a matter of clarification? In the absence of any other request for clarification, I will request. Now we'll start with Terence and then Antoinette. Like that. Go ahead, Terence. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm slow this afternoon, but I definitely saw a slide that seemed to refer to a 30-something%. And I just wanted to, if that slide could be brought up, I just want to make 100% sure that the 18.65% include all the court applications, including the equity injection clawback and the RAB recalculation, as well as all the RCAs. If that's all encompassing in the 18.65 and the 12%, I just wanted to just confirm that.
Can I go ahead, Charles?
Please go ahead, Antoinette. I think Charles may be having a challenge.
I just want to check what is the battery asset base that NERSA decided on, and then what are the conditions, if any, that go with this tariff determination? And then just shortly, will the slides be made available to us, please?
Maybe I can then respond.
Yes, you can go ahead.
All right. Just to be clear, Terence, the number that you see, the 18.65%. Firstly, so the applied for number was 32.17, including RCAs as well as the government injection. But if I can go back to the previous slide to just show you where this Eskom had applied for the liquidation of the already approved RCA of 3.4 billion rands. to be liquidated in the 23-24 and 24-25 periods. However, in its previous decision at the previous meeting, the regulator, in considering the impact of the applied for changes, the regulator had requested that that particular RCA be liquidated over 3 years, but not starting from 23-24, but starting from 24-25. Hence, if you look at the line RCA line there in terms of liquidation, for the first year we actually we adjusted that down by that 1.7 billion. That's number one. But in terms of government injection, yes, it does include them. As you can see, it includes the 15 billion for which was applied for Eskom with no adjustment. It was then approved by NERSA. So the decision that you see of an 18.65% increase in terms of tariffs, the implication for tariff increases is inclusive of all of those. So I'm really hoping that is now clear. And yes, you will get the presentation. We can share the presentation. I'm hoping I've responded to the questions. Charles, please assist.
Yes, I think you have, Mr. Kumele. Colleagues, any...
Sorry, Mr. Thebela, there was a question around the asset base, what has been used, okay, and the conditions that have been placed on what is being approved.
Okay, sorry, yeah. You can also respond to that, Mr. Kumele. Thanks, Mr. Bugul.
Thanks, Chairperson. Firstly, in terms of the asset base, we had a correction. There was a particular error that was corrected with negative assets in terms of the FY 22-23 decision. We had an agreement with we actually had a court order with a court settlement with Eskom on that, and that matter was settled. So the actual amount that was applied for the regulated asset base is indicated there, and the adjustments that were made is really because, as you would know, Antoinette, that the regulated asset base includes works under construction. It includes all other issues, including working capital and what have you. So it's really the adjustments that were made by NERSA were not necessarily in disagreement with the replacement, the so-called DRC, the depreciated replacement cost of assets, as done, as evaluated by Eskom. We had a landing on that, but it was really just the recognition of some of the apply the methodology. It was about how those assets were actually recognized, especially the ones that were supposed to be transferred, were supposed to be commercialized, because that are actually handled very differently in terms of the methodology. But that was the number that you see there of 107 in terms of the RAB, and of course then the average RAB, and then we multiplied that by the work that was applied for of 1.7. That's where we actually had a landing of that return to equity. Sorry, return on assets. Now, when it comes to, in fact, was very uncomfortable with the applied for, especially OCGTs, as well as call ban rates and all of the things like that. So what the regulator then said it made the decision that it made subject to some non-negotiables. I'll maybe quote a few of those non-negotiables. Is that one of them, in terms of those non-negotiables, relates to the manner in which OCGT is used. That OCGT was supposed to be used for picking, and that what we are saying is that that's one of the conditions. The use of maintenance funds
that the amounts that have been allowed for maintenance, one of the conditions is that we need to make sure that those funds are used for the purposes for which they're intended. All of the conditions will then be clearly detailed in the RFD, but I just thought I'll actually quote those two. But the regulator is making this decision under strict. The last one that clearly that I cannot not miss is that Eskom needs to improve its EAF. It needs to drop in the first year those unplanned capacity losses down to 20%. In the second year, it needs to drop those unplanned capacity losses to 18%. Those are the conditions, strict conditions, which are non-negotiable. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Gumede. I see a hand from Ed, and I guess it's a follow-up again from Antoinette. If you can go ahead, Ed.
Thank you. I just wanted to double check something. So the 18.65%, does that come into effect on April 1st? I just want to double check that. The other thing is I was just looking at this statement, and the statement says NERSA approved revenue is 334 billion rand for the 2024-25 financial year. And it says that results in a 12.74% increase based on the tariff, and the NERSA approved tariff for the 2023-24 financial year. And I thought the 12.74% was for 24-25, and the 18.65% was for 23-24. And I'm just wondering if there's a typo in the statement or if I'm just being confused. Thanks.
Okay, Antoinette, you can come up with your question.
Yes, Charles, what happens if Eskom does not adhere to these non-negotiable conditions? That's the one question. And then the other question is, it seemed as if NERSA really battled to make this decision. There was a recommendation drafted by the ELS, and then that was looked at again, and there was another recommendation drafted, and actually it was tabled by the ER today, and then the ER even made changes to that. Can you perhaps tell us what those two recommendations was that the ELS arrived at? Thank
you. Typo. The numbers that you have before you on the table, on the presentation, are the correct numbers. They may have been swapped around a bit in terms of the statement. But the increase for the first year is 18.65 equivalent, and then 12.74 for the following year. So that was the easier one. When does the 18.65 come into effect? Yes, for the Eskom customers, Eskom supplied customers, it comes into effect on the 1st of April. But for municipal customers, of course, it needs to take into account the actual difference in financial years. That number is just an indicative number, but the actual number for municipal customers will then have to be determined when we finalize the ERSA. So, but for that number that's appearing for Eskom supplied customers, the 18.65 will come into effect on the 1st of April. That's number one. So coming back to Antoinette, what happens if Eskom? The methodology, the tariff, and all of the things that are actually approved for in respect of Eskom as a licensee become conditions of license. So what you are asking is that what happens, Ed, if you can mute yourself, thank you, of license. Clearly, Eskom is not the only licensee, as people would have indicated, also municipalities, the extent to which people have been saying perhaps NERSA needs to make sure that its licenses comply with the conditions of license. So all we're simply saying is that there will be a requirement for Eskom to comply with the conditions of its license, and this tariff that is given to it in terms of section, which is provided for in terms of section 14 of ERA, is that it needs to be that tariff, as well as the conditions that come with it, needs to be complied with as part of the conditions of license. So if Eskom doesn't office conditions of license, and I don't want to second guess what will then happen after that, but we would like to believe that it is time that NERSA exercises its right in terms of making sure that the conditions of license are actually met properly. Now, your second question, NERSA struggled. We did. The struggle, Antoinette, came from the fact that we're in the rock and a hard place. On one end, we are aware that there is load shedding. So in the event diesel, to close the gap, the supply gap, we don't want to end up being accused of that. But it was clear because anyway, Eskom itself had actually, in its own application, had applied for 12%, which did not close that gap in terms of load shedding, that at least we will not be accused of something like that. That's on one end. On the other, the economy is in the state that it's in. And also these cost increases are way above that have been asked for, are way above inflation. Now, the question is, on one end, you need to actually satisfy the licensee that is asking and saying, well, if you give me a bigger purse, I'll be able to go buy more diesel. I may be able to reduce load shedding. On the other, you have one that simply says, but in allowing these excessive increases way above inflation, are we not being considerate? So it was a difficult decision, Antoinette. But can we share the decision of the ELS? No, the decision of the ELS is only a recommendation. The reason why it's never published is because it is just a recommendation. There's only one regulator, and the regulator is a body of 9. And the decision that can be shared is the one that comes from the body of 9. Thanks. Charles, you are on mute.
Mr. Gumede, may I propose that you take the questions from Terence, because we can't get here, Charles.
Yes. Please, Terence, if you can go ahead.
Thanks very much. I just, if I crudely just divide the diesel request of 17 billion in half, because you've halved the load factor, do you think I will get to the actual RAND figure, around 8 billion?
Terence, I'd rather supply you with a number. I'm sure the colleagues, sorry, I just have not checked. The colleagues are still checking, and they'll give me the exact number. But in terms of at load factors of 6%, the amount that in terms of gigawatt hours, the amount that is then going to be supplied by diesel is going to be 1,266. But in terms of the RAND terms, I still don't have that. But I think you can also just calculate. But the colleagues are checking, Terence. Hopefully before we close today, it says it's 8.4 billion for OCGT at unit cost of 6 rand at 6.64 per litre. That works out to 8.4 billion rands for OCGT. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you are, Charles.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Gumede. I think colleagues, we need to take the last round of questions. I see a hand from Bali Padaji. If you can go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. It's Vali Padiachi from the Association of Municipal Electricity Utilities of Southern Africa, commonly known as the AMU. Mr. Gumede, if I understood your comment in the presentation in respect of your non-negotiable, one of them is that the EAF factor, if I had to extrapolate what you said, hope I'm correct in terms of the maths, is that you are requiring Eskom to reach an EAF of 75% for year one, year two. And now we're sitting at below 50% EAF at the moment. So if I understand the regulator correctly, and being a non-negotiable, if Eskom does not reach 70% or plus or minus 70% year one, then it'll be a potential, not much of its potential, but a contravention of their license condition. And so would the regulator call that requirement? In other words, if they do not reach that segment, at least EAF going forward, would the regulator call that license into question, operating license? I say that because I'm just looking at reality. Can Eskom get to 70%? We would like to in year one from 50%. So I just wanted to get clarity from the regulator in that important respect. And I'm back to you, Chair.
Thanks. I see a hand from Paul. Paul, you can also ask your question.
I can't hear Paul.
I think you're on mute, Paul. We can't hear you, Paul, at all.
Can I? Oh, there's another hand from Chris. Maybe what Paul is trying to sort. Yeah.
Yeah, you can go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. Chris Yellen here from EE Business Intelligence. May I ask, when you talk about the EAF should be 72% or 70 or 75%, EAF for the financial year, or are you talking about some point during the year? Just to clarify, are we talking about the EAF, the average EAF for the financial year concerned should be 70 or 72 or 75 or whatever it is? Thank you.
I'm not sure if Paul is back.
Paul, let's try again. Seems not.
All right, maybe let's then respond to the first two questions. Firstly from Wally. Thank you for the question. Well, quite frankly, the regulator has got to drive efficiency. It's an obligation and a responsibility of the regulator. It is what is enforced. It simply says, even in terms of Section 15.1, that whatever that is considered, it must be for an efficient licensee. So to the extent to which the efficiency, the level of efficiency, what amounts to the level of efficiency might still need to be properly defined and given as a proper condition. But the issue here is that we all know where Eskom has been. So we, in fact, we're just asking for anything north of 65%. That we then say that we would need to follow the ERA process. There's an ERA process for non-compliance. But in so doing as well, we have established a relationship with Eskom far better than we had in the past, that we're going to have to negotiate something. We're going to have to look jointly, and if we need to come to the party ourselves to assist in terms of addressing first for the drop in the EAF jointly, and then jointly coming up with a solution that will actually make sure that we've got an EAF which is north of 65%. It is of the regulator to simply then say, because the plants are there at Eskom and consumers are paid, to simply say, yes, you're paying for this, but because these plants, without trying, are not functioning, that will just employ diesel to supplement. So yes, there needs to be a process then. Is it going to be an easy process? No. But we're going to have a stretch time. So that's where we're coming from here. Now, linking that to the question asked by Chris, is it an average for the year? Remember, we're looking for revenue that is going to be spent over the year 24-25. It may start slow, but eventually the idea here is that we need to put processes that will put back the plants that need to be back online to bring the EAF up. They need to be back online in time to be able, so that you don't use, so that Eskom can use. Would it be an average? It needs to be decided. It's not just a something that cannot be discussed with Eskom. We are going to have conversation with Eskom. There is somebody that's
Lindelani, please. Is it Lindelani as well? Please, whoever is having his mic on, please just be on mute, please.
I see Chris's hand is up. Can we then take Chris before we go back to hopefully Paul will be back?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gumede. Mr. Gumede, I'm now very, very, very confused, and I hope you can help me with my confusion. Please, can you advise clearly what is the non-negotiable average EAF required from Eskom for the 23/24 financial year, and what is the non-negotiable average EAF required from Eskom for the 24/25 financial years? Thank you.
Thank you. I know you're looking for the exact numbers, Chris. All we're going to say to you is that, as we're saying, maybe can I start with the unplanned capacity loss factors? So all we're simply saying is that we're wanting to have targets. The first target is that 20%. For whoever is sitting right now, it's got to drop down to 20%. Does it drop down on the 1st of April, in June, in May? The point is, on average, in terms of the year, for the 24-25, we'd like to get this unplanned capacity loss factors down to 20%, and then 18% the next year. Now, we are sitting where we are sitting in terms of and I guess what we are saying is that, are we sitting at 58% EAF at the moment, or are we sitting at are we sitting at 51, whatever the number might be? All we're simply saying is that next year we want an EAF north of 65%. Now, our target to be 72%, so that at least Eskom can then achieve a stable system without load shedding, even at open cycle gas turbine load factors of 6%. That is all we are saying. But is it going to be an immediate process like that? The answer to that is no. What we're saying is that we have these non-negotiables, and we're going to have to enter into a conversation with Eskom in terms of how we bring these numbers, how we bring this back to where it's meant to be. But I can't give you the exact numbers, Chris, unfortunately. Sorry.
Thanks, Mr. Gumede. Colleagues, I think there seems not to be any further questions, and I would suggest that we have come to the end of the media briefing. I just want to thank the panel for the presentation and the remarks, as well as the responses to the questions. And also to thank all of you colleagues for making time to attend this media briefing. I would like to also indicate that the request for the slides and the remarks by the chairperson will be sent to all the colleagues that have requested that. This brings the end of this media briefing. Thanks to all of you. Bye.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.